Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is John. Today I have in my living room my brother, who's an experienced trial attorney on both sides, both as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer. And we're going to talk about the Dan Markel murder trial that's now 8 years in the making. So welcome to the program. Carl, real briefly, tell everybody about your experience in criminal law.
Yes, over my 30-plus years, many times I've been either a defense counsel and or a prosecutor or a supervisor of both those positions. So been assigned a lot of felonies, and through those felonies I've had very successful outcomes for virtually all the cases. And from that I've acquired a sense of what it takes to prosecute and defend cases. And John's told me about this case, so we've been talking a lot about it over the last 7-8 months, and so hopefully I have some key insights I can bring to the table.
Well, thanks for being here, and I think you do. Real quickly, let's cut straight to the chase. The most recent development is Katie Magbanwa has been labeled a state witness or potential state witness, and she, I think this week or last week, got pulled up to Tallahassee. What's your opinion on what's going on with that? And do you think she has the potential to really spill all the beans with everything that she knows?
Well, it appears that she has nothing to lose at this point after going to 2 previous trials, not getting acquittals in either one, and in fact getting convicted on the second one, that she has a life sentence that she's facing. And based on her testimony, which was so much of the forgetful, I don't remember and I don't recall, that it was basically a disaster for her, that now if she does have memory that she's able to bring to the table and speak clarity and actual truth this time.
Is this unusual, what you see happening? It seems to me as a layman, not an attorney, that it was too late for her to come forth and now change her story completely.
Well, the fact that she's testified extensively and denied any knowledge of this and now supposedly have a knowledge about it begs the question, why did you lie beforehand and why should we believe you now? So she would have to come up with a lot of details that she not come beforehand, and of course her previous testimony would be used to impeach her by defense attorneys that are now going to be attacking her as being a liar, you can't believe her, and she's just fabricating this now because she's trying to get a better sentence.
So how does a prosecutor or the prosecution overcome that objection? Because clearly they know this is coming when it gets to trial with Charlie.
If she's able to bring concrete details that nobody else knows about and is able to point them to different types of information and evidence that the prosecution does not have, or maybe even the prosecution does have but nobody else knows about, so only a guilty party would know about this, that's how they know that, and they would be able to present her as a credible witness to bring forth that information.
So clearly, if they think that her information is valuable, she will definitely be going on the stand. This is not written testimony. This is her on the stand, and she would have to come across as a truthful on the stuff that she now is revealing. She'd have to basically be credible.
Right. So a prosecutor would not want to ever bring somebody on the witness stand that they thought was a liar. Mm-hmm. And if they had any issues where they lied in the past, they're going to have to get that out in the open, explain that away, and then present the truth that's now come to light. And also, like I say, bring out the details that lends itself to why this person is credible.
Mm-hmm. So, and she has, in my opinion, every incentive to speak only the truth, nothing but the truth, especially since I'm sure she's irate at Charlie and the fact that without him in her life, she wouldn't be in jail right now, potentially for life. So doesn't she have every motivation right now to just completely clean?
She has absolutely nothing to lose at this point by coming clean with the truth. If she comes forward with any more lies, though, then she's pretty much slammed the book shut, I would say, on a situation like this. If somebody's given one last opportunity to set the record straight with the prosecutor's office, because keep in mind the prosecutor's office doesn't even have to listen to her at this point. They could just say, we don't need your testimony, but there's perhaps something that her attorney conveyed that perked the ears of Georgia and the prosecution's office, where they thought, okay, we're willing to sit and listen to you and see what you have to say now.
I think there's a good chance that she could directly implicate Wendy based on what conversations she had with Charlie and maybe even Wendy herself, because remember, there are pictures of her being around Wendy, and we have no idea what was discussed.
Yeah, potentially. We don't know what other conversations took place, so if she has other evidence of that, and it would probably, like I said, it'd have to be more than just her word. There has to be corroboration that would have to be pretty strong and convincing before they would rely on her testimony for that.
Couldn't she even be just used for certain segments? Like she was the one at the Dolce Vita restaurant that we couldn't understand her at all because of the tapes and all the quality of the recordings. Could they use her just for certain segments like that alone and a couple other things, or?
Right. If a prosecutor wants to bring a witness on for a limited purpose testimony, the defense counsel is able to explore that for cross-examination purposes beyond the scope of the direct.
Oh, they
the
can.
Judge could limit it if it gets too far off, but because it's all related to the case, they would attack it as being you lied about this, you lied about that are unrelated to the narrow focus that the prosecutor has.
So Charlie's upcoming trial, if she's testifying to what he said, that's not hearsay because he's there in the courtroom, correct? So if he tells her that Wendy said this and Mom, Donna, said this, that's directly admissible testimony, isn't it?
That should be admissible because it's a admission by a party opponent and also by other rules of evidence that they could be able to proffer that into evidence. Sure.
Wow. So in your opinion, big scheme of things here, the prosecution knows right now the end game, who they're going after up the chain, or is there there's still some uncertainty, like, well, we don't have.
A lot of it has to do with how confident the prosecution is on the evidence they have. Keep in mind the police wanted to have more arrests from the get-go, but the prosecutions said no, we're only going to go after the shooters right at this point, right, or the hit team. So they're waiting for more evidence, and so what it takes to have the prosecution satisfied is an individual call, but the fact that they're co-conspirators shows that they believe that they're guilty as well.
But the length of this case, is this not unusual?
It is, in the sense that they pretty much could have nailed who drove this car within a couple days of the crime. So if you think about it, the neighbor said it was a Prius. They got the film from the club where Dan Markel was working out. There was a Prius there that showed exactly that those two things were consistent. They were staking him out and following him. And if you connect that to what was said also about this being a possible hit from Charlie, automatically they should have been looking for video footage of all the interstate traffic leaving Tallahassee within a certain hour or two window of that afternoon, because they also knew the exact time of the hit, remember, because Dan was on the phone. And so they knew the exact moment he was killed, or shot, I should say. And based on that, it would have been really easy to follow up and find surveillance footage of that car and get the license plates from the toll tags going on the interstate south into Miami.
What do you think's going through Wendy's and Donna's and Harvey's minds right now? Because we heard the whole story, and there are a lot of memes on the internet about the Pepto-Bismol and Donna having diarrhea.
Right.
And that was years ago. Fast forward, since then, Katie got arrested and convicted, and now Charlie's sitting in jail since, I think, April. What's going through these people's heads right now, do you think?
Well, they have to have nothing but sheer panic and paranoia and restless nights of no sleep, because now they have their prized son, a doctor, awaiting trial for murder of their grandson's father. And that is, and they have the kids there as well, and being able to look those kids in the face and know that they killed their father, and how they live with that conscience has got to be pretty disturbing, and how they put on a straight face and live with themselves is pretty hard to contemplate and imagine what that would be like.
And before his arrest, he talked to Mom a lot, daily, it seemed like. And now, that fact he's in jail, he can talk to her daily, but everything's recorded in jail, isn't it? Right.
I don't know why, as a co-conspirator, they allow those two to talk, though. That's something that's puzzling. I saw that, too, where they said he was allowed to, like, maybe 30% of the calls every day, 30% of the calls every day was to his mom. And so why they would allow a co-conspirator to talk, unless they figure he cannot keep a lid on things, and they're going to find more information, so it's worthwhile for them to talk. But I think from Donna's perspective, the fact is if they don't talk, weren't able to talk, that would cause her a lot more mental anguish.
So I noticed that when you look at the call logs from Charlie, who's been in jail since April, there aren't any calls that I could see or that were published that were to or from Wendy down in Miami. What are your thoughts on that? Why do you think they're not talking to each other?
I think that was probably part of the original plan, that they were going to have very limited communication. It was only going to be on Snapchat, someplace where law enforcement would not have access to what was planned out. And also the fact that he's in prison now speaks volumes as to his incompetence as a murder planner. And she probably is kicking herself that she trusted her talk big, tough guy type brother, that he knows all, he's an expert in everything kind of personality, that she trusted that this thing would work fine, and that no visibility would ever be focused on Miami.
Well, to add to that, I can almost guarantee that he said the same type of words of absolute certainty to Katie to get her to hire her baby daddy and Louis. I can only imagine him saying, "Hey, you have nothing to worry about. I got this. We got this. You don't have to worry about anything. You're gonna get your cut of $100,000."
Right.
So he bamboozled multiple parties, not just his own family, but Katie too, because he comes across.
Right, because think about it. Katie is dating a doctor, and according to his own words to Wendy, a single mother with 2 kids, no man is interested in dating, and yet he's dating her, so she's feeling very special and unique, and he's given her all this confidence to go do this thing and make the money, and that she's thinking she's permanently going to be connected to him for life, even if it's not relationship necessarily. It's going to be another form of money she'll be able to make a play on it the rest of the life, that he owes her and is indebted to her forever.
Sure. Now that's why I'm thinking she's out to get back at him big time, and I predict that she's gonna spill everything, that she won't hold back at all. Plus, if she has good representation, they're gonna tell her that, right, Carl?
Right. Because think about the control he had over her, and she was believing everything he was saying, and maybe believing him over her own attorneys even. And so when she finally got sentenced for life in prison without parole, sitting back and reflecting on it, she realized she was taken for a full ride by Charlie, and she fully got duped, and she was a fool for not cooperating from the get-go.
Yeah, thinking the same thing is being thought by Mom,
right?
Donna, Harvey,
right,
and Wendy, thinking, why do we trust him?
Right. And he probably told her, look, I'm not going to help you financially if you plead guilty. If you go contested, and you should get acquitted, you will get acquitted. Trust me on this. And that's maybe why she was dumb enough to go contested.
For someone with Katie's income or lack of income, it strikes me as really bizarre that she could afford not just one, but 2 full-time attorneys to represent her.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I've never seen that before, where an indigent defendant has not just 1 but 2 to go to a lengthy murder trial that takes a long build-up time and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to investigate and scour over evidence, come up with a plan of presentation of evidence and attacking the state's evidence. So to have that kind of money at her disposal obviously came from a third party.
But they maintain, and they even had a hearing over it, that that would be easy to cover up, wouldn't it be? Even if they were to lie in front of the judge, her attorneys?
Well, I think it would have been helpful if they would have pulled the thread on that to find out exactly where it was. I don't know the details of that hearing, but if they just said, well, it came from a third party, and they vouched for the fact that it didn't come directly from other parties like the Adelson, then why they wouldn't have continued to pull that thread and get to the details, I don't know. But if I was a prosecutor here in Texas, I would definitely be pursuing that.
But now it's also interesting because her lawyers were still the same. So the notion of her spilling the beans on them doesn't seem like that would happen. That she would tell the truth on everything else, but the fact that potentially Charlie and the Adelsons paid for her lawyers.
I heard that Chris Lacoste was her attorney in the proffer. I don't know if that's true or not, but if she has the same attorneys, then obviously they're going to help steer her in what to say and what not to say to the prosecution. And granted, she's going to have to come clean at this point, but the finding out the truth is something that you would think the attorney would be able to do before trial, especially 2 murder trials, to get to the bottom what's really the true story is, the ground truth of what your client's defense is. So apparently they're essentially admitting that they weren't able to get to the bottom of the truth. Their client had control over them.
Let's talk about Harvey. It seems to me like he clearly knew after it happened what's going on. Is that considered conspiracy? Let's say somebody didn't know a murder happened, but then you meet somebody that admits to you that, yeah, I did this. And you don't say anything, and you don't say anything for years, and you're associated with that person. Is that a crime to know about?
You have to do, for all states in a federal court, there has to be some kind of act in furtherance of this conspiracy. So mere knowledge that a conspiracy is taking place, states would not have it where you're a guilty party at that point.
But to erase what I just said, now that I'm thinking about it, there were signs that Harvey was in on it the day, on some level, the day of the murder, because who was it that actually called him, even though it was never picked up? I think it was Katie. Didn't she call him?
I think it was Luis Rivera that called him.
That's right.
So how he had his number and all that could be an indicia of culpability there, but you need something more than that to show culpability.
Whereas with Donna, I think there's a lot more evidence, a lot more circumstantial.
There's more circumstantial, but not as strong as Wendy. I would say there's very strong evidence against Wendy.
But the naysayer go, yeah, but there's all circumstantial. We talked about that earlier. Can you talk to the audience about your opinion on circumstantial evidence versus direct, like somebody that actually says he saw this happen?
Right. As a prosecutor, also as a defense attorney, I've used it as a defense attorney many times. Circumstantial evidence can help prove the innocence of my client if I'm on the defense side. And if a prosecutor, the circumstantial evidence is small indications of evidence that in and of themselves do not reveal the truth of the matter, but they paint a picture of what the truth is. So many times that's more convincing to me as a prosecutor if I'm prosecuting a case like this, where I'm looking at the details and all the details will point in the same direction if they're guilty. If they're innocent, you're going to have a lot of the stuff. You maybe have a few things pointing here that could possibly be incriminatory in nature, but in a case like this, where like Wendy's testimony, both in the trial for Katie as well as in her interview with the police, there were so many things that just belied truth from my experience that I just saw. Basically, it was manufactured testimony, and it would be very easy to cross-examine somebody like her if she got on the witness stand. I think that she wasn't heavily cross-examined by Georgia because she was under an offer of immunity, and they probably wanted her to cooperate to some extent, and they wanted to indicate through their questioning that there was enough to conclude that she was a part of it, but they didn't want to make her go to the extent where she was going to invoke and feel offended by the questioning.
Let's talk about Wendy's interrogation the day of the murder of Dan Markel. You've watched parts of that, and
right.
Share with the audience your opinion after watching a few hours of her answering questions.
So as a prosecutor, you're looking at it from a neutral standpoint. You don't want to have any conclusions about guilt or innocence, but you're looking for indications that pop up. The things that popped up right away was the fact that she never asked about her kids or the time or the manner of attempted murder, and that to me was like a resounding red flag of alarms indicating she had to have known what happened, because a normal person would not let those questions go unanswered. The protection of her own kids, that would be number one, and that was not brought up till much later in the interview. And so that to me showed planning and consciousness of guilt. And so did she admit it? No, but that's even more that's even more credible in a lot of ways than if somebody said, yeah, I saw her there at the scene or something like that.
But the fact that she was seen by a police officer at the scene of the crime, I think an hour later or so. To me, that's really damning. Is
Okay, so as a prosecutor, what I was looking at was how close was he to the scene. Okay, if it was like a couple houses away and she could tell that there was police cars parked in the driveway of Dan Markel's house, then that's something that, yes, absolutely. The fact she didn't question the officer and just did that quick turn and escaped out of there, that would be very helpful to know. But if it was like all the way back to where the intersection of that street and Trescott was, or Trescott, and I forget the other name of that street, but if that was the case way back there where you can't see, the house is not in view, which I believe was the case, then I think the fact she's going in that direction is a strong clue, but it's not as a strong clue as if she actually saw the cops in front of the house.
I also think it looks bad, her story of what she was doing. Why would she go that far out of the way to go to that liquor store when there was one a lot closer?
Right. And if you look at her testimony, that she said she drove back there for memories, think back and reminisce about living there. It's sort of like she had good old days that she missed, or trying to come to terms with her marriage ending and stuff like that. I mean, I just thought that was so contrived and fabricated. Anybody can see through that.
So was there anything during her testimony that was indicative of an innocent person?
I could not find anything in the quite a few segments of tape that I watched, and I saw most all of her testimony in the Katie trial, and I would say pretty much everything she said, as a prosecutor, I would be able to, I believe, convince a jury was a lie.
Let's talk about the FBI. I'm curious right now, what are your thoughts? I know you don't know directly, but if the FBI was in on the action years ago, wouldn't they even right now possibly be monitoring, even though I'm sure they moved to WhatsApp or some other encrypted communication channels? Aren't they still in on it? For instance, watching them to see if they happen to try to flee the country because they're so worried about them being convicted. What are your thoughts on that? Are they still being, in your estimation, actively monitored?
In the sense of surveillance and wiretapping, that kind of stuff, that is so heavily involved with resources. It's so resource intensive, and you need a court order to do that. So the court order would have been for a limited period, so that would not be in effect anymore from my
But they don't know that.
Their attorneys have probably told them that.
Carl, let's talk about Jeffrey Lacoste, which I think was the best witness on the stand in that entire trial of Katie. What's your opinion of his testimony and his future testimony more than his past testimony? And what are your thoughts on him and what's going to be provided to the state going forward?
I think he's a crucial witness for the prosecution of the case. I mean, he pretty much solved this crime from the get-go. I think he was so shocked that this actually happened, that the comments that her brother was wanting to put a hit out on Dan Markel was probably incredulous. You don't think really a Dennis family doing that kind of stuff, but the fact that he then was killed in his own driveway, and she moves within, next day or a couple days after a funeral, and I think he finally woke up and realized what kind of person he was dealing with in Wendy, and so the fact that he left a day earlier was a major blow to being able to throw a detour to prevent prosecution of the Adelsons. And because think about it, if he would have left the same time he said he was to Wendy, then even though they would have had him on film, stopping at gas stations anywhere from Tallahassee up into Tennessee, the bottom line is he just needed a 5-10 minute window to be able to do the hit. And so that would have not exonerated him. So the defense would have been using him as the main target to say he's the one that did it, not any of the Adelsons.
Yeah, this could have really diverted the prosecution's resources,
right,
and maybe never gotten to the bottom of the case. But and now, as it turns out, instead of helping her, he's going to, in my opinion, help throw her potentially in jail one day. So just the irony of what she tried to manufacture potentially versus
right,
what might actually happen is just, I call it sweet justice if it ever happens.
Right. I mean, he was if you listen to his story about how the relationship was strung along and he was sort of getting this yo-yo type treatment, and then it played up right to the timing of when Dan was killed, and he was abruptly cut off a couple days prior. All that is this kind of circumstantial evidence. To me, that makes it absolutely beyond a doubt that Wendy was a part of this planning. And this is the kind of evidence I'd be arguing in front of a jury as to why you can rely on Wendy's actions prove her own guilt.
I like it.
Without a doubt, her actions prove her guilt. None of those things she did that day that that I've seen on the evidence so far indicate something that an innocent person would do. Now, granted, talking to her brother, something like that, could be innocuous, but the number of calls, the length of the calls, and the fact that calls are made down to Florida and Miami, where the hit was ordered from, all these are indications that the Adelson's footprint is all over this crime scene.
And then if I'm in a jury in 2023 for Charlie and potential other Adelsons, I'll be listening to Katie's words, even though we would be, told or warned that, her testimony can be suspect because she's just trying to save her own butt at this point. But I'm thinking if everything she says, and there's a good chance this will happen, is everything she says is corroborated by state's evidence already, at that point she could actually she could come across as someone who's believable. Have you seen that happen in trials where even though they've lied in the past under oath, the fact that they're now, yes, trying to save their bacon, but I would believe them if everything is lining up. And is that exactly what might happen?
Yeah, similar. If they come clean and there's indications that they are being truthful, then you can present that with confidence in front of a jury and explain that. Just the same as having someone with a long criminal record that happens to see a crime or hear a confession in jail. Those are the same kind of things. You just deal with the baggage that comes in there. And what you're looking for is what indications are there that help sell this as credible, right? So if you had like a jailhouse informant, a jailhouse snitch, what are kind of details are they able to say about the crime that only the killer would know, right? So that's the kind of credibility I'm talking about. That's the indicia of circumstantial evidence to show that the person is not fabricating something.
Wouldn't you agree, though, that even without her evidence right now, Charlie is sunk?
I would say they are going forward with his case whether she's a witness or not.
Right. I'm thinking that she's going to be instrumental. If she ends up being used, then you know that they've vetted her and that she's going to be value added in a massive way against the rest of the Adelsons.
Right.
I don't think Harvey will be charged. That's just my prediction. But
I think it's premature for anybody to say that anybody is going to be ruled in or out. I think the evidence shows that clearly the family was all a very close-knit family. They're all up in each other's business about what's going on up there with Wendy and dealing with the kids and Dan Markel. And the fact that that the call was made to Harvey from the day of the hit is a very telling sign, I would say, that he had foreknowledge. And maybe he wasn't the planner, and maybe he didn't have to, and he just let Donna sort of being the ringleader of that. But and like I say, acquiescence or knowledge of the crime is not, it does not make you guilty. You have to be doing something, act in furtherance of the conspiracy. And so I don't know what evidence they would have of that. And maybe he just wanted to take a backseat, did not want to become that much directly involved.
I sometimes think for a smart family of dentists and lawyers, how stupid could they be? For instance, if you're thinking that you pulled off this crime, imagine to be myself an Adelson, I would say we have to start acting after the crime as though we're innocent. We would not change the boys' names, for instance. We would absolutely let Dan's parents see the boys, but they didn't do those things. She changed their names the next year to away from Dad's name and to her maiden name, and they denied the Markels, who are good, upstanding people and relatives of theirs in Canada. They denied visitation. Help me square this. It seems to me like they're really stupid criminals. If they're the ones that did this, you would think, hey, now we got to act like we're innocent, but they're not. They're acting like they're guilty.
Well, the fact that Wendy up and left town within days of the funeral, and the rest of the Adelsons refused to cooperate with the police, would definitely make them zero in on them, because why wouldn't you cooperate? And so that should have steered them as targets number one, as being the source, not Lacoste. And now, of course, you have to flush out all the evidence and confirm or deny whether somebody's a suspect or not based on where the evidence leads you. But here in this particular case, they have acted, like you're saying, there's so many different ways they're acting guilty. I think they also were brazen about changing the name because they figured they were in the clear. I mean, because like I said earlier, the trailing the car and tracing the car out of that rental shop in the Miami area could have happened within a few days. And the fact that they were able to do this a year, I think they changed names within a year. They thought they were probably in the clear, nothing was ever going to happen to come back and haunt them.
Yeah, I've commented before on other people's channels on YouTube that the sheer arrogancy of his family, to think that we don't even have to maintain our veil of innocence afterwards. They just didn't care. Like, do you remember when they left? By the way, the murder was on a Friday. I didn't realize this. They left town on Monday. So 3 days later, they left for South Florida, and they promised the police a call, and the police tried calling them, and they basically hung up on them. To me, I just thought, wow, what stupid criminals.
Well,
to think that.
Well, if you stop to think about the depraved nature of this crime, because think about these poor boys lost not only their biological father, but the second most significant, you could say the second most significant father in their life at that time on a daily basis, which was Jeff Lacoste, and you could tell he genuinely loved the boys. So to have both those men in their lives completely eliminated within 1 week, less than a week, would be such a trauma for these boys. To know that you're doing that to your own sons and to not have any conscience about that, and to go on and try to live your life as if nothing happened is truly beyond belief.
Yeah, not only that, but you made me think of something. I always forget about, by the way, the Jeff Lacoste father figure role. I totally forget about that. Thanks for reminding me. So it's more than that, though. It's not only their dad, but their stand-in father figure that clearly wasn't replacing dad, but an additional good man in their life, father figure, but also the granddad. So it's three of the most important male roles in their models. The murder of Dan stripped away, and they move away 3 days later down in South Florida. I don't think they give a damn about these boys, by the way. I think these boys are tools for them, and that's why I haven't heard many people say this, but I believe those boys are potentially in jeopardy because if this family thinks they're going down.
Right.
You can't.
I mean, and that's a great point because the grandfather Markel lives up in Canada. So you got those three. So you're right. 3 men have been eliminated within 1 week. Well, that one I guess didn't happen instantly, but for most purposes, he's not living there, so he doesn't see much of him anyway. But I think that was the ultimate intent anyways, pretty much get rid of all the Markels. Think about it this way. A normal person, if someone murdered the father of your 2 kids, you would be so angry about that. You would be wanting to have answers from the police and demanding where they're at in the investigation to find the killer or killers. You would not let the police off the hook. And no matter if you moved because you felt you wanted to be closer to your family for comfort, you would want to still dial up the police and say, where are you at in this investigation?
By the way, that's a great point. I haven't heard anybody else say that. That's really good. Can you imagine if that was also brought out at the trial?
Because what are you? No matter what you think about Dan Markel, he's the father of your kids, and they will be devastated the rest of their lives on a daily basis. And if you're not fighting for that, think about it. She's a human rights lawyer, and she's not even fighting for that. What does that say? That's another data point on consciousness of guilt.